All right. Episode 10 of the Stones of Strength podcast with the Stoneman, Martin Jancic. Thank you so much for joining us, Martin. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, it was my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me along to do the podcast and be a part of it all.
No, of course. This is a bit of a surreal honor for us because, like many people, we really became hugely aware of stone lifting, especially historic stone lifting in Scotland. Like David was aware of the Dinnie Stones being a strength athlete, but through Stoneland. And you were such a central character in Stoneland, and in many ways, I think because you're a working man, you're a family man, you're a real person, right? And you're so the sort of endearing human element that you brought to the documentary made stone lifting seem so approachable for those of us who are not so familiar. It wasn't like there was a specific barrier to entry into stone lifting by way of having, superhuman talent or being this kind of athlete or being associated with a specific organization. It was just like, if you love stone lifting, this is accessible to you to either do by way of lifting historic stones if you are near some, or to go out and find stones and create your own modern stones of strength. So
I guess the question would be, for myself, and I know many of the listeners of this podcast, you are going to be their entry into stone lifting and historical stone lifting, and that documentary Stoneland blew my mind. And, as somebody whose family came from Scotland as a strength athlete, I got absolutely fired up to go there. I'd set my sights on doing the Dinnie stones, some of the natural stones. COVID happened, so I could put in the back burner. But for those people, well, if anyone here that's listening to this hasn't actually seen Stoneland, pause this podcast and go watch that first, because that's way more important.
Your priorities are mixed up.
Yeah, but for anybody that actually isn't familiar with you, would you mind telling a little bit of a background on yourself and how you got involved in natural stone lifting, and your background maybe as who you are even before you became involved in stone lifting?
How did Martin Jancic become Martin the Stoneman Jancic?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you again, because that was a very nice introduction. And the fact that Stoneland was kind of detrimental or a big part of how you both got into stone lifting kind of makes me quite happy to hear that. I'm very proud to have been involved in that step in your lives. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
Of course, yeah.
Well, I first got involved in stone lifting back in October 2011. So it's been over 12 years now. I was working. I was working as a builder. I did my apprenticeship and became a builder. And I noticed on building sites I was really getting quite strong, and where other guys might lift one concrete block, I'd be lifting 4 or 5. It might take 2 or 3 guys to lift a concrete lintel and put up over a windowsill. I would just put it on my shoulder and walk up the ladder and place it on.
Yeah.
So I realised I was getting stronger in most, just natural strength. So I went and looked up, one night I went home and looked up strongman competitions. But back then, I was only maybe 90-ish kilograms, maybe 92 kilograms. And the only kind of strongman events I were like the opening event for the World's Strongest Man. The 105s, 90s, they weren't really around so much then. So, but with the research that night, maybe about an hour, I then came across an article written by Peter Martin about the Inverstone. Mm-hmm. So then I read the history and about the Inverstone and how people have travelled from around the world, especially America, to come over here and lift that stone as part of their vacation, a holiday over here in Scotland. So I got quite intrigued, and then at the bottom of the article it said it was written by Peter Martin. So I got in touch with him the next day and arranged to meet him in about maybe 3 months after that, so I can go and lift the Inverstone myself. He was going to show me exactly where it was. So I just did that. I got a stone from work and I started lifting it in the back garden. and I got a barrel. So I would I put a tire on top of the barrel, and I'd lift the stone on top of the barrel, just as many times as I could over that 3 month. And then I met Peter down at the Crathy where the stone used to stay. It did stay for over 40, 50, 60 years. And then I lifted it twice that day on my shoulder. And then I kind of got hooked after that. It was just an immense feeling of seeing this stone in the garden and knowing that it had so much hidden history behind it. And people from around the world had come and placed their hands and tried to lift or did lift this stone. And it was just a surreal sort of moment to know that I was now going to attempt it myself. But all I wanted to really do was see if I could lift it up to my chest. But because I was so used to lifting things on my shoulder on a building site, it just naturally went up, rolled up onto my shoulder. And then Peter asked me to do it again so he could take a video. So I did it a second time. I took my hand off and gave him a little wave. And then we just became really good friends after that. I went across the road and sat in a pub for a little while after that, and we spoke. And he showed me a few books that he took with him, and then he told me about the book he was writing at the time, and all the other stones he'd researched. And then I, amongst a few other people, helped with that research more. Not so much the historical background of the stones themselves. It was more because Peter didn't really lift the stones himself. He would get other people who were stone lifters to go and lift the stones and let him know like a rough sort of weight that they might have been, or how it felt to lift them, or how it felt to walk up and see the stone and stand over the stone, and just how it felt to be involved in stone lifting itself. And after that, he got in. I think it was the Emberstone was the first one I did. Then about 5 months after that, he let me know about the Bravenstone.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked, because I live maybe 35, 40 minutes from that location at the churchyard, he asked if I would go and lift it and let him know what it was like to lift it and see what I could do with it. So I think I just had my appendix out about 2 weeks before it, but I was just itching to go and do it.
Well, there's a coffin right there just in case something went sideways.
So, I had my appendix out a wee just not long before it, and the stitches were still kind of stitches had just kind of gone, but there's still a bit of sensitivity there, a bit of pain. But I wasn't really worried. I was so itching to get down and just see this stone. And then I thought myself, I could just go down and see it, but I thought, nah. Once I'm there, that was it. I lifted up on the shoulder a few times. And it was just, I remember the feeling exactly, especially the feeling it was to drive up to the Braven churchyard and then park the car, and I'd seen the stone through the gates, and I was just an overwhelming feeling of just kind of excitement of being there, seeing the stone, and knowing I was about to undertake lifting like a piece of history that had been lifted hundreds of years, and being involved in the stone itself, and being involved in some crazy things, from like being the stone they would lay in a coffin, torture people. It's just seeing the stone and walking over it. It was just a feeling that it's hard to describe.
Yeah,
it's just that overwhelming excitement feeling of being there and seeing it and getting involved and knowing that I'm gonna give this a go, just like everyone else has.
For anyone who hasn't been familiar with that stone, so the Berevan stone is in a 13th century. There's a 13th century church there, and on one side of the church there's a whole series of headstones and graves. On the other side, completely off in isolation all by itself, is this open stone coffin. and then a semi-spherical granite boulder that sits beside it. And rumor has it was that that coffin was a site of torture or punishment for people that were deemed to be witches or criminals. And so there's a couple of different versions of the history. One is that the stone is someone's laid in the coffin, the stone is dropped on them. Others, they're laid in the coffin, the stone is placed on them. Or others, they're another version is that there used to have been a stone slab that was placed over top of the coffin, only exposing the perpetrator's face, and then the bereaving stone was placed on top of that stone slab to essentially pin them in place for the duration of their punishment.
It was a throwing stone as well, I thought, at one point, too. I was having to chat with, I think it was Jamie Gorian was saying that at one point it was actually a clan's throwing stone. I hope I'm not wrong on that, but that seems to be sticking out as well in my mind.
Yeah, it was known. It was there's one of its names is like the is a putting stone, which is a throwing stone.
Yeah.
But I'm not really 100% sure if that was correct or not.
Okay.
I mean, it was used as a form of torture.
Yeah.
But I'm not really 100% sure on the putting stone part. I think it might have got that name from because there was other stones that were also called putting stones, throwing stones. But as you know, with when something gets a name and then something else comes along that's sort of similar, the name kind of just transfers over.
Right. Yeah. We had a different experience when we went to the churchyard to lift that stone. Unfortunately, there was people puttering around, cutting the grass. So luckily they stopped. They gave us some time to stop while we lifted, so that we had a nice peaceful lifting experience. But
that's right. I forgot that it was. Yeah, it was quite loud. But like he said, parking the car there and walking in, even though it was loud and there was a little more traffic there that we had than it sounds like you might have had. It was just such a neat experience walking into that ancient history, especially. That was one of the things that blew me away in Scotland. Like, we're from Canada. An old building where we're from is 100 years old.
Yeah.
Right. And so to walk into these ancient graveyards that are, 13th century graveyard, it just kind of blew my small Canadian mind away. Because like this history, like Canada has a lot of space, but not a lot of history, like that kind of history, right? Yeah. Like obviously the people here before.
The architectural history.
There, like that's a better way to put it. Yeah. So it was wild. And that's such the stones as well that you have in Scotland are very different. Like, we found easily over 100 stones here that we've dug up and weighed and have as a part of our local stone lifting. But the smooth round stones that you have just present just such a wild challenge. And it can make, because what is the bereaving stone? About 110 kilos, is that right?
105.
105 kilos. Now that's very different than the 105 kilos that we have here. Just the shape of it, and it's so smooth. It's so old.
Well, that's what makes stone lifting such a unique concept on its own right. Because you go to a gymnasium and you lift a deadlift, for example. Doesn't matter if you put on bumper plates or the Olympic plates that they use in competition, or just any kind of Olympic shaped plate in a gym. The weight and everything, the weight's the same. The bar's the same, everything's the exact same. Doesn't matter what kind of plate you use, nothing changes. It's the exact same thing. But with a stone, you could go and lift a stone that's 130 kilograms, and then lift a stone that's 110 kilograms. But the stone that's 110 could be more difficult to lift because the texture, the shape, the imbalance of the weight, the size. So stone lifting is a very unique thing.
Yeah.
Taken away from everything else. There's no telling from one stone to the next what they're going to be like. It's like the two Glenroy stones. There's only about 5 kilograms difference between the two. Well, no, there's one of them's 133 and the other one is 137. But they're still in different shapes. They're still different from each other. A lot of people find the heavier stone easier, and some people find the lighter stone easier. But it's a really good example of two stones that are so different from each other, and they're roughly almost the same weight, but they're very, very different to pick up.
It's a very different lift, right? Like the weight can be the same. Lift is so different.
Yeah, I mean, you might pick up the heavier stone because it's flatter, it's better shaped to lift, really. it's flatter at the bottom end, so I call it the Grey Mountain because it looks like a mountain really, in shape. But because it's flat at the bottom, it's an easier lift, I think. Whereas a lighter stone, Big Red, it's very misshapen and very off balance, and it makes it's smoother as well. So the everything just makes that a harder lift, really.
Mm-hmm. I got a question, sir, because clearly, like the Inver stone is a very important stone to you. Like your Instagram handle is a Stoneman 265, and 265 is the weight inscribed on the side of the Inver stone, and it was the first historic stone you lifted. If you could sort of explain, because like David Kilwin always sort of characterizes the experience or the specialness of lifting historical stones quite well, in that you're essentially placing your hands on, back on the same object as your ancestors. You're reaching back through time and connecting with your ancestors by lifting the stone. And in some cases, you may be lifting a stone that someone in your family had lifted generations ago.
Mm-hmm.
Was that initial? Because anyone lifting who has done stone lifting has felt that feeling, that the bug that bites you when you start stone lifting, and all of a sudden you're immediately hooked. For you, was that initial draw to stone lifting, or the sort of further draw to stone lifting after lifting the Inver stone, because of the physical accomplishment of having lifted the Inver stone, or was it more tied to that historical connection, or maybe a bit of both?
It was a mixture. I would say 50-50.
Yeah.
It was the fact that it was flushed in history. It's surrounded in history. And I mean, history is the greatest thing we have because it ties us to the past, to our ancestors, to even your mums, your dads, or people from hundreds of years ago. It ties history is the one thing that ties the world together.
Yeah.
It's a string that ties everything. It's the one thing that can tie the whole world together. Because history is really engulfed. For me, it was 50-50. It was the fact that there was so much history behind it, and then it was the accomplishment I felt from actually picking it up and being able to lift it as high as I did. It was just, it's like when you're lifting your I mean, fitness is probably the greatest, probably the best thing we have as humans. It can make you feel unbelievable. It can make you feel on top of the world. If you're having a bad day, you can go and have a workout, and from releasing hormones and then endorphins, and getting your heart pumping, your blood racing through your body, flicking more oxygen into your muscles. It's just an overwhelming feeling that can change your mood, can change you as a person, as a character. I mean, stone lifting has made me who I am as a man, Without it, I don't really know who I would be at this moment in time. And because I've had so much from stone lifting over the years. When I write the word, I write it with a capital S every time because I've got so much respect for what I've had from stone lifting. So I always write it with a capital S, and I write it as one word because that's what Dr. Bill Crawford does, and I've got so much respect for Bill Crawford. I just wanted to follow in his footsteps and do the same thing.
Well, that's all well said. And so when we were planning on going to Scotland, I was having a beer actually with a couple of my uncles, and I'd mentioned what our goal was to go down there and lift these historical stones, and I've spoke about this a couple of times, and I'm getting roundabout to the point, but I'd said, you get a chance to compare yourself with these men from the past. And I've said a few times in this podcast that when I went there, my mentality actually shifted because it wasn't to compare myself, it was to become a part of the history, and I learned that through the process. But getting back to my point is my uncle had said, well, it's not really a fair comparison because, you got people these days, you got all these gyms, how are you going to compare yourself to guys in the past who just lifted all day? And, I kind of have the thought that, if I had to pick one of two guys, you got a guy on the left-hand side that worked out in a gym 10 hours a week, or you had a guy on the right side that lifted stones 10 hours a day, I know I'd be picking the stone lifter on the right-hand side. Now, your background into stone that got you into stone lifting kind of comes from that old school side where so many of us, myself included, come from a strength background, competing in powerlifting, competing in strongman competitions. but yours came from an actual working background where your strength was developed through labor, and it's kind of almost what I would attribute to real strength. And so I just thought that was a really interesting angle that you
Well,
have that maybe a lot of us don't.
yeah, because I call it construction strength. That's
Sure.
what,
Yeah.
that's what I call it, construction strength. So when people ask me how I got involved, I say that I was working in building sites, and it's just through like construction strength. It's just strength from working, lifting all day, and can work at a building site. It's like when you would maybe put like the cement mixer onto the back of the truck with cement in it. I know, and people were always there was always people yapping and speaking all day in building sites as well. And if you're like me and I just like to get on with the job and get it done and work hard, so I get kind of fed up of waiting for people to come and help me, like maybe lift something on the back of the pickup. So I just do it myself. Um, so it's just natural construction strength that I got from working the building site. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
then that's why stones, I like put stones on my shoulder, because it felt like it was just a natural reaction really from going to the chest. It just kind of, like the Inverstone, for example, just rolled up onto the shoulder. It was never my intention to do that. I just picked it up, but it felt so good it just kept going, rolling up onto the shoulder. And that was just from working the building site, because I was used to putting everything on my shoulder. It's like when I was lifting, before I was a builder, I was working on roofs. And I was a slater, fixing roofs with slates and tiles. But I was a labourer at the time, and I had to make sure, before could learn a trade, I had to make sure there was enough slates or tiles on the roof for other three people that was working. So I would just go and pile up the slates as much as I could until my arm was stretched out as full as I could, and I was up on here, just as many slates as I could handle with a straight arm, and I'd walk up the ladder like that. Everyone used to be waiting for the ladder to break. It was so much of a bend.
Operational health and safety probably had something to say about that, but
So stone lifting, just been like a natural progression really for me, especially getting lifted onto the shoulder. Just
for anyone who
like,
hasn't lifted the Inverstone, like to be able to not only lift the Inverstone, but lift it to your shoulder as your first, attempt tackling a natural stone, like that's remarkable strength. Because I know, like, I struggled quite a bit with that stone when we went over to Scotland, just because it is so smooth, and it's much harder than to your point earlier. There's so many different variables that affect how hard a stone is to lift. And so the Inverstone, I mean, it's got a bit of grain to it. So you almost, for myself at least, to be able to get a successful lift, was sink my fingers so deep underneath it and then try to clamp down and connect as much of my forearms to the stone as I possibly could. And I was able to get a successful lift, but I left a piece of me behind at the Inverstone. Really, like, my skin came off onto the Inverstone and I bled onto the side of the stone.
You bled quite a bit.
But it was a worthwhile sacrifice, because that was one of the stones we went to Scotland that I was really intent on lifting as well, because of its ancient history, but as well as its impact and contribution to modern strength sports by way of the McGlashan stones and now Atlas stones. So
the remarkable thing about stone lifting is really, which I wish more people would kind of sit back and really look at the whole aspect of stone lifting. A lot of people are getting involved and just kind of do it as they were at the gym, lifting heavy weights, But stone lifting is more, it's such a unique thing, like I was saying, because all the different aspects and characteristics that the stone has, the smoothness, the texture, the misbalance, the size, the shape. And then it's all about really an individual's journey to whether they can lift the stone, train to lift the stone, go and visit the stone and lift the stone themselves. It's not about like being in the gym and shouting and screaming and trying to beat everyone else. It's just an individual's unique journey.
Yeah.
To go and better themselves through a strength process and through being a part of the stone's history. Each stone is engulfed in so much history and such a unique challenge. It's all about just lifting, being a part of what the stone is, lifting it, and just being better for doing it, being a better person in yourself for doing that.
It's sounding strange to someone who hasn't lifted stones before, but even though it is an unbelievably physically taxing effort to lift a stone up, there is a serenity to it. And I think that comes from, like you mentioned, when you're in the gym, like people will just, you go max deadlift, you're yelling and grunting and then slamming the weights down with no regard for essentially like your adversary, which would be the bar and the plates at that time. Whereas when you're out lifting stones and that stone is your adversary, there's so much respect involved, especially when you're talking. We have training stones where it's a little bit different, but when you're lifting historical stones, you your your respect from the stone will just dictate essentially how you lift it and how you put it back down. And so there has to be a sense of calmness, or else you're going to end up mistreating the stone, and that's the last thing you're going to want to do.
Yeah, you have to really, the word respect is quite misused these days. You have to respect the stone, the tradition, the history, the location where it sits, because there's so many beautiful locations in Scotland, and a lot of these stones sit in these, say, locations. But it's like, if you went to a gym and then the gym owner went and bought like a dumbbell or a few weights that are maybe lifted by, say, Donald Dinney back in the day, you might lift them or put them onto a bar, but you're not going to mistreat them. You're going to try as gently as you can to lift them and put them down again. So you should do that with stones, because there's such a great history there.
Mm-hmm.
But just respect the people that have done it before you and what it is. Like Sir Peter Martin, him and his father, they documented these stones. David Webster, God rest their souls, can respect them if nothing else, and don't mistreat the stones. If you're strong enough to go and lift them up, you can put them down again. As best even if you drop the stone, you drop it. Can these things happen? Just move your feet out of the way before you get a broken ankle, a broken foot. But just try the best you can to put them down with some kind of effort. You try and use the negative aspect of it. But the negative aspect of a stone lift, putting it down again, with anything weights as well, it's the negative aspect of putting a stone down, or putting a barbell down in a gym even. That is the biggest part of, say, the functionality of the whole thing. So if you go and move something in a building site, or move something in your house, you're not saying you move your washing machine, you pick it up, you put it down again. You're not going to drop it, are you? You're going to want to put it down under control. So you're going to get that. Your body's going to learn that mechanical aspect of the controlled part of putting the washing machine or box or anything you've got back down again, through the negative part of the stone lift. So the negative part is very, it's a very important part as well. Not just for being respectful, but as a functional movement for yourself. For your
very good
body
point.
mechanics itself.
So Martin, one of the things that, besides the rope documentary, that I really, really enjoyed of yours, like that documentary was fantastic. I probably watched it 10 times, especially, like, and I'm not exaggerating, leading into Scotland got me so hyped up. Mm-hmm. I'd even ride the assault bike to it, just because it would make me want to work that much harder as I was preparing for Scotland. But something else that helped me prepare for Scotland was the book that you wrote with Dr. Bill Crawford. I read that through 2 times. I gave it to you. I think we shared it around our circle, our friends, and it was fantastic. I think the historical element was very, very good. The way that you broke the stones down and the diagrams were great. But also what I thought was really interesting was how you broke the lift down into 5 different parts, and also the way that, the size, the weight, the texture, the balance, and I'm forgetting one more thing here of the stone. And I thought that was really, really interesting, because it's such a nice way to look at a stone. And it's something, when you become an experienced stone lifter, you don't think twice about it. Your brain automatically does that as you're figuring the stone out. But for somebody that's beginning, that I found that would be very, very helpful for him. So would you mind giving a little bit of background on maybe why you decided to write that book, how long it took, and basically the process of doing that book with Dr. Bill Crawford?
Well, after we made Stoneman, and then it was released in December 2016, from there, for like 8 months or a year, both myself and Bill were both getting contacted by lots of people, hundreds of people asking how to lift their stone properly, asking like about the history of the stones, asking about how to, like, say if they went and found a stone, what kind of stone they should be looking for. But the biggest question was how to lift it correctly, because quite a few people who are quite strong in the gym, deadlift, squat, etc. And they were saying that when trying to lift, say they were lifting maybe 250 kilograms or 200 kilos in the gym, and then the way to try and lift a stone it was 105, 100 kilos, maybe 110 kilos, but they struggled a lot because the technique wasn't there. Because the worst question I've always had from anyone, and I still get it now, well, how much weight should I lift in the gym to go and lift this stone? Well, it's an impossible question because I've had guys who are who could lift 400 kilos on a deadlift, a guy who could press 180 kilograms overhead on a log. But when it came to like the Braving Stone at 105, that was a struggle for him because it was so different. So I say, well, if you, Bill and myself, tell everyone, if you want to lift stones, you have to train with stones.
Mm-hmm.
But we're both getting so many questions from people. We just decided to put all these questions, or the answers to the questions, because they're always the same questions roughly. We just thought we'll put the answers into a book, and then everyone, if you buy the book, you can then hopefully get all your questions answered from there. And anything more specific, they can just get in touch with us from there. But we just wrote it because, like we say, we're both getting so many people asking us the same question, and it takes a lot. It was taking a while for myself, probably Bill as well, to answer people back because you're always writing the same thing, and because you're answering so many people back every week, it was taking a lot of time out of your free time, out of your day. So the best thing to do seemed to be put all the answers into a book, so then people could buy it and then just have everything at hand there, and they could even take a book with them and travel and then read as they're going, and get the answers that way.
Yeah, and I guess, heads up to anyone who's listening to this that is struggling with their stone lifting technique. Your book is available on Amazon, so go seek it out, and it has a lot of great like tips in there as well to adding plates and things carefully and safely to increase the weight of your training stones as you progress in your strength. So,
because lifting the stone to lifting the weights themselves is two completely different things, because the body reacts different, because it's about both two things, about the centre of gravity of your body and the stone, and then the stone being so compact, the weight being so compact. Because the further away the weight is from your body, gravity affects it differently from your own gravity, so you can move that weight easier.
Mm.
It's like if you put example, the Tom Stoneman lifted a stone at Atlas Stone at 260, 287. Then Eddie Hall's got a 500 kilogram deadlift. So you can see by the hundreds of kilos that are different between that two lifts, that because the stone is so condensed, your body, you're never going to lift up 500 kilograms on a stone. So lifting a stone and lifting it on a weight of a barbell is two completely different things. So where your body is going to work, your smaller muscles have to work more as well. Whereas when I say a deadlift, it's a big compound movement, just like a stone's a compound movement. But then because the way you've got to place your arms in your body position, your smaller muscles are working harder as well. Whereas they're not called into place so much on when you lift at a bar. Mm-hmm. So there's more force going through fibers are the smaller muscles as well, so it makes everything a little bit harder.
It can be so challenging, and it's like you can't even compare the two. And we've brought this up multiple times on this show, and so anyone that's listening, sorry for the repetitive point, but in 2018 or 2019, they had the Odd Hogan Tombstone at the Arnold's, and that's 410 pounds. And they're using a tacky towel, so that removes a lot of the grip element. Not all of it, of course, not even close to all of it, but a lot of it. And you got these guys that are deadlifting 800 pounds, 900 pounds, 1,000 pounds that can't even lap a 410 pound natural stone, right? So those are, you can't compare a barbell and a stone. And also, like you said, the technique and the smaller muscle fibers. Like we have one that I'm working on trying to shoulder, but it's 403 pounds, and I'm not a big guy. And so to even the body positioning alone, you can't pick it up between your leg. You have to have it out in front of one leg. I have to pick it up, plant it onto one of my thighs, post that thigh up, bring them together. Like just the technique in it becomes such a massive part. And the technique is something I think that a lot of people maybe miss out on. Like you said with your question, these people are focusing on, well, if I get to a 600-pound deadlift, can I lift a 300-pound stone? And it has nothing really to do with that. You have to get good at the technique of stone lifting, and the only real way to get good at that is to get exposure to stones.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's it exactly. You see, because each stone is unique. No two stones are the same. So the technique, what I teach people is, I teach them a basic way of lifting, like the foundations. It's like building a house. You're doing a solid foundation, and then the way the house looks between two, 3 houses, 4 houses might all look different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
One might have a longer section or a bigger roof or whatever than the next house, but they've all got the same basic concrete foundation holding them up. So I teach people that I'll kind of stick to the foundations of the stone lift, but then as you progress and lift, you'll find your own little ways that work for you, and then try a few different things, find out how it works for you to lift the stone better to a specific height that you want to get, and then just adopt that, and then which it could also be different from 2 or 3 other people.
Mm-hmm.
2, 3, 4 people might lift the same stone, all with a lot of slightly different technique. They're all adopt the same basic thing. You get your feet in position. You'll grab a stone. You'll get your legs. Take a deep breath in. You lift up over your knees. Pull it in into your stomach. Put your chest into the stone. Breathe in. Lift it up high. Everyone else follow that same really basic technique, but along that path, they'll also find their own little ways what works for them. Like you're putting the stone onto one leg really to lift it up. I did the same thing. Sometimes with heavier stones, I lift it up. It first comes up over the knees and goes onto my right leg, and then I pull it on into my stomach, onto my other leg from there, and then pull it into my stomach further, put my chest in, and then lift it up. So there's no really. What makes stone lifting unique is there's no right or wrong way to really do it. As long as you stick to the basics of the lift, and then you'll find out what works for you. It's like deadlifters. 3 guys might lift the bar different, but they're all sticking to the same technique. They're getting their feet in position, they're pulling the bar in close. Their hips and that'll be about the same alignment, and then they'll just find out what works best for them. But they might lift this bar a little bit different. Feet might be closer, wider. Their arm span might be in close, might be out wider. But the same technique they're adopting to start with, the basic technique, is all the same. They're just finding what works for them best. So it's the same with the stone. Use the basic principles, the foundation of the lift, stick to that, and then you'll find out what works best for you in each and every stone.
I think introducing variability too, like as you'd said before, people kind of get stuck in this mental trap of saying, well, if I want to be able to lift this specific stone, do I have to get to a 500-pound deadlift? Do I have to get a 600-pound deadlift? It's that sort of thought of a linear progression of increasing weights is going to increase your ability to lift any stone. But that's not the case. And even when you're training with stones, just because you're able to lift increasingly heavy stones doesn't mean that when you lift this 300-pound stone, you're going to be able to lift any 300-pound stone. right?
No.
Make sure when you're looking at your setup or the training stones you have access to, you do have ones of different size, of different shape, of different texture. Try to cover all those variables. Don't always just be looking like, well, I conquered my 250-pound stone. I got to go find a 280-pound stone of similar shape. Go find a 250-pound stone of a completely different shape, because that's going to tax different muscles that you haven't been taxing by lifting the same stone over and over. We've seen it with
Or
people
even,
too.
or even
Sorry,
get a lighter stone. It's different. Looks different. You
totally
can even go
different,
for
right?
a lighter stone. It's
Yep.
different shapes and different.
Yep.
Like
We've
even
seen
get a lighter stone, like even 100-pound lighter or 50-pound lighter, but it's smooth, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Or
absolutely.
lift the stone you've got, spin it round the other way and lift it that way.
Yeah, and we've seen it
You
with
know.
people who can absolutely crush it and lift their specific training stone with ease. That's hugely more heavy than some of the stones that we train with. But when they come and try a different stone with a different weight distribution, unfamiliar handles, all those sort of things, they really struggle, right? Because they have trained much in the way training for a deadlift is going to translate to stone lifting. Training with your specific stone is not going to translate to all stones.
Because because the stones are all unique, and like I said, there's no two that are the same. Part of the challenge is um, strengthen your grip. Using your grip, and then finding that hand position.
Mhm.
Turn the stone to a certain position where you can utilize that grip. And if we pick it up a few inches, put it down again. If it doesn't feel right, it feels like it's going to slip out of one hand, say, spin it
Mhm.
around another direction and readjust where you're going to put your hands. It's a puzzle. It's part of the puzzle. It's part of the challenge.
That's actually one thing that I say to a lot of people when they're trying to learn is a lot of people that come out to stone lifting are familiar with the basics of a deadlifting, and pulling the slack out of the bar, right, is a pretty common expression with deadlifting, where if you just go to yank the bar, it's going to the weights are going to clink and you can hurt your back. So you pull the slack out of the bar before the weights come off the ground. And I say something similar in stone lifting is you kind of have to pull the slack out of the stone, which doesn't directly translate, but the point is because the balance can be so finicky on so many stones, you get your hands in a position and where you think that it should be a good place to lift, and you go to pull the slack out of that stone. And if the stone goes to slip, you stop right there, because there's a feedback in our body that I've seen happen with many people. If their hands aren't exactly right place and that stone starts to spin, they mentally just give up on that stone and they're not going to get the lift. So you really have to take that time at the very entry stage of it, read the stone properly, get your hands in a position, pull the slack out of the stone, so to speak. And once you know that your hands are in the right spot, that's when you can lock the rest of you in, drive up, and that stone's going to come up.
Or if you
Yeah, that's,
don't,
that's where the roll comes in handy. Because
yeah.
when I go and lift the stone, I'll put it to this. I can look at the stone and think, right, I'll put it in that position because that looks okay for me. I'll go and put my hands on it. I'll get my feet, hands, legs, and lift. That's what I call it. So I get my feet in position, my legs, my hands and my legs, and then I'm ready for the lift. But
Mhm.
I'll like pick the stone up a few inches off the ground first, for a few reasons. It gets your body ready. It lets your mind ready to feel the weight. It lets your body get ready to feel the muscles and the back and the legs, everything, and feel the weight off the ground. And then it also lets you, like I was saying a minute ago, it lets you know if you've got the right hand position for you. Whether you might have to put your hands further back or one hand further back, readjust one hand, readjust them both, or turn the stone, say, upside down, the opposite way, and then try that way. Lift it again, a few inches off the ground. If it feels really comfortable, like feels like a strong grip, and you're ready, then take a deep breath in and lift it over the knees and up, pulling up into the stomach, and chest in, deep breath again and up again. But the row is probably one of the most important aspects, because then because if you do pick the stone up and it slips, it drops, your everyone's like natural reaction is to go, and if something drops, you go and try and catch it.
Mhm.
It's a hard thing not to try and catch something when it drops. It's just a natural reaction. But if you pick a stone up and say the balance is off, so when you pick up and it rolls forward or rolls back and it drops back on the ground, you try and grab it before it does that. All that weight of the stone has to go somewhere, so it's going to go through your body and back into the ground, but it's going to go through everything. Also, it's going through like your weakest part, really, which is your lower back as well. So you're going to hit your lower back, by grabbing it and it pulling the stone jerking you down from grabbing it, or you could hit your bicep because your bicep is then a lot more forces on working your biceps because you went to grab your stone and you're trying to pull it up, so you're putting in a curling even a few inches of a curling motion, so all that pressure against your bicep, so you could hit your bicep, you could hit your lower back. So an important aspect of a stone lift is just to put your hands on it, pick up a few inches first to make sure that the balance is there, your grip is there, it feels right in your hands. And if it does, lift it again. Either keep going or lift it again, or put it down, readjust, and then lift it again from there.
Yeah. It's something that I learned pretty quickly in Scotland, going from having training stones here that are quite well handled to lifting the smooth and spherical stones there, is that concept of pulling the slack out of the bar or the stone, really extending your arms and pinning down your back muscles. Because what I was running into is that because the stones are so smooth, without pulling the slack out of the lift, I was exploding up to try and get the stone up, but all I was doing was peeling my hands off the stone, and the stone was slipping through, rather than making sure, so instead of the stone coming up, my arms are bending and my hands were coming off, versus when I finally realized, and this actually was with the inverse stone, after multiple attempts, just squeezing as much as possible, pulling the slack out of the lift, and then driving up. You're not going to have as much explosive power coming off the ground, but at least then that force is going to lifting the stone off the ground versus pulling your arms off of the stone. And it just kind of it speaks to the beauty and sort of the analytical mindset you have to come at stone lifting with, because in many cases, like, had I not traveled across the ocean to go and not specifically lift the inverse stone, but I mean when we were in Scotland, like, it would have taken a lot for us to walk away from a stone without a successful lift. But if that was a stone here, I would just be like, you know what, that's a bastard of a stone. I'm not strong enough yet. Versus being like, well, what is it that I'm doing that's wrong? I should be able to get this weight. This stone is different. How do I have to adjust my lift specific to this stone? And that was something that it took a couple of attempts and a little bit of arm skin to figure out, but it was well worth it. So, yeah.
On the note of the bicep injury, I've been very fortunate with stone lifting and having no real injuries, knock on wood and all that, but I have had bicep troubles, it getting really, really tight. And so for anyone that's listening, if you're having issues with your bicep, my best piece of advice, and I'm not sure how you would feel about this, Martin, but is to work your upper back. And not only to work your upper back more, but to learn to lock your back in place. Because what can happen is if you don't lock your upper back in, when you go to lift that stone up, you're going to rely on your hands, wrists, forearms, and then by nature, your biceps come after that in your kinetic chain, right? And so you're going to put too much emphasis on the bicep part. But if you lock your upper back in place and then your wrist, you're going to take a ton of the stress off of your bicep, and it's going to put you in a safer position. So really play around with, like, even doing a curl. Like, if you have your shoulders rotated forward and you do a curl, you're going to feel it one way in your bicep. Now, if you try that same movement with your scapulas retracted, you're going to feel it totally different in your bicep. So apply that methodology to stone lifting, and I think you're going to really, really notice a huge drop in bicep tension. And then over time, the development of the upper back is going to really, really diminish your chance of any injuries with it.
For me, with a bicep, what I I agree with a strong back, because when two movements that I kind of developed and started doing a lot back in maybe probably early 2012. It was a stone row and a stone squat. So having a stone in front of you and on your lap, and then just squatting up and down with it through phase 2 of the movement. But I think even more important exercise was the stone row. And then so you're just bent over and in your usual position and you're rowing the stone. It's one I do quite a lot, and I feel the most beneficial aspects from that lift in its own. So it's going to give you a strong back. It's going to give you good force to lift a lighter stone, because the stone rows are meant to be done heavy, but leading up to lifting a lighter stone up over the knees. So if you can, let's say, lift a 100 kilogram stone, if you're say you try to lift a 100 kilogram stone, for example, but you can't get it over your knees, you would go and maybe row with 110, 120 kilograms for a while, and then after that, take the weights off, and then the 100 kilogram stone will just fly up over your knees because the force and the power you've generated the strength through lifting the heavier weight. But if you strengthen your back through doing stone rows, but then once at the same time, using the technique is going to really help with the biceps, because once you get the stone over the knees, you try and sit up, straighten your back in an upward position, not like you're sitting so much in a chair, but just straighten your back as best you can. Pull the stone down the thighs into your stomach, and then once it's there and you've got a straight back like that as you can, then as long as you keep your arms in this position, never in a curling position, because as soon as you put them here in the curling position, all the weight of the stone is going to go into the bicep here. So keep your hands in this sort of position here, grab it, again, get the hand hold so you feel comfortable, or get into this position as best you can. I mean, you might have to come down here a little bit, but try not to curl the stone underneath. Try and keep your hands on the side as best you can. Then once it's pulled in tight against your stomach, come down with your chest, put it in, and then just try and squat up the bit as much as you can. Instead of like coming through, standing up and coming through with the back, try and keep the back where it is, squat up with the legs, and just let the back naturally straighten up with the stone up here. But keeping the arms in like this position, or slightly down here, that'll keep the pressure off the bicep as much as possible. So the more you're going to come down here, the more pressure is on the bicep. So the more chances are it's leading to like a bicep injury, a muscle tear or a tendon tear.
Yeah, that's really good advice for sure. So I had one question actually, because you wrote the book on stone lifting. So this is something like, so not this past summer, but the summer before, I was battling with a 408-pound stone. So that was twice my body weight. And I was fighting with it all summer. And, I really wanted to get it up on my chest, holding it in control for it to be an actual lift. And a friend of mine thought that I had got it a couple times more before that I actually did, because I had extended my legs. But I'm curious your thought on this, because I almost see, and this is in no way to diminish anybody's lifts or anything like that. I almost feel that there's a differentiation between standing with a stone and chesting a stone. Because I've seen many people, they lap the stone, they grab maybe, let's say, on top of the stone, and then they straighten their knees and their back, but the stone hasn't really come up. It's sitting right around their belly button, or still in their hips. Whereas, in my opinion, I think standing with the stone, that stone is on your chest, locked in, and it's coming up from your hip. So I'm wondering if you feel similar to me, where standing with the stone is a stone on your chest, or if it's your body's just standing erect and the stone sits where the stone sits, as long as your body is in that position.
No. What it is, there's there's 5 different lifts and 4 different phases of the lift. Phase 1 is lifting the stone from the ground over the knees onto the thighs. Phase 2 is standing up with the stone on the chest.
Right.
That's what you're speaking about there. So if you're standing up and it's just on the stomach here, the phase 2 isn't complete. Phase 2, the stone must be up on the chest. That is what phase 2 is.
Yeah.
It's like putting the stone on, trying to put it on its shoulder, having it sitting here on the chest, leaning back so much, and then that's not some people do that and think that's on the shoulder, but the stone needs to be on the shoulder. It's like comfortable on the shoulder for it to be on it. Again, class as a shoulder lift. But phase 2 is the completion of phase 2 in the lift is having the stone on your chest while you're standing up as erect as you can.
Yeah.
You're in because the way to do that, because a lot of people, they've got it on their stomach, they'll stand up and it's still sitting down here. But the way to go over that is, can you put the stone on your lap, and then once it's over your knees, just set yourself, pull in, So you pull the stone in as much as you can, right against your stomach, really tight.
Mm-hmm.
You readjust your arm position to can get a bear hug it, can get a really good grip. And then what you do, you then put your chest into the stone. But don't just, if the stone's sitting here, in fact, I've got something here that I can demonstrate a bit in here. Right, the stone is sitting here, okay? And then put your chest into the stone. But instead of just falling down like that, actually come down into it like that, against here, stand up and have it here. If you don't put your chest into the stone, as you're saying, when you stand up, it's down here. You know, we just thought it's on the stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Take the complete lift, you must put the chest into the stone. And that way, when you lift it, it's going to be high on the chest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Straight.
I
That is all.
completely agree. That was my point of view as well. But I just thought you wrote the book, so you'd be a good guy to ask.
But that is also a very good thing for if you're in, say, competition. Put your chest into the stone, and then when you stand up, it's going to be high on the chest, at a good place so you can, say, put the stone onto a barrel, for example. But if you stand up and the chest is in the stone before you stand up, it's sitting even maybe high on the stomach. You have then got to use a lot of energy to get it from here to here and then onto the barrel, say.
Mm-hmm.
But if you put your chest into the stone when it's on your lap, just before you lift, it's here, you can just place it onto a barrel and then move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
But
those
they will be up here to complete the lift.
little technique points I found are so big, especially when you're going up to a PR lift type status. Like that same stone I battled with a lot, and I would get onto the front of my knees and start getting ready for the lift. But I found that if I took just an extra couple seconds to snug that stone up into my hip socket, as much as I could, or my hip crease, pardon me, as much as I could, then that stone was actually sitting that much higher up on my chest when I went to go lift. And I had trouble squatting a stone up. So the technique that worked was I pulled that stone right up against my chest, as high up on my hips as I could. And then I actually, instead of thinking about straightening my back or squatting the stone up, I focused on actually dropping my hips underneath the stone. And what that did is allowed me to recruit all my hip muscles, which are stronger than my quads, and it would drop it under and create enough energy that stone would actually roll or pop right up my chest. And I found that made a big difference for me. It's a very similar movement, but a couple inches up your thigh, and just trying to cue those different muscle patterns and those muscle groups made a massive difference in my lifting.
Yeah, that's what I was saying before. If you just learn the basics of the lift itself, you will then find out little bits that'll work best for you. Which is some things that people do that works for them that I've tried just to try it, and I didn't feel very good doing it. It didn't work very good for me, but it works well for them. So I wouldn't try and change it because it works really well for them, but just not for myself. So I've got my own way. I lift the stone. But we both stick to the same basics of the lift, the same foundation, the same body mechanics, the same everything is in the same the body's in the same sort of position. We start to lift off the same. Everything it's in against the stomach, chest down. Everything follows the same pattern, but you just find little ways, little bits that actually work better for you as an individual. But I mean, come back to having the stone on a chest to finish the lift for standing up. It doesn't have to be up here where it's like blocking your face. As long as it's on the chest,
Yeah.
that finishes the stand up in phase 2 of the movement. But if someone say they go and lift the Inverstone, for example, maybe they can't stand up with the chest, and it's just on the stomach, or maybe it stays on the thighs. I wouldn't ever like to discourage anyone or say
No, of course not.
because the fact that they are actually as long as someone uses, I can 100% gives everything they've got to that lift. No matter if they get the stone on the shoulder or the press or they stand up with it here or it's on the thighs, if they're giving it 100%, then I think their lift is as good as any other lift.
Yeah. It's about the best.
You know.
Yeah, I completely.
I wouldn't. And you can never say that someone's lifting the stone wrong.
Yeah.
As long as you can just encourage them to stick to the basics, and then improve their technique. You know, if it needs be. Like, I was with a guy once, and he lifted a bribing stone. I just happened to be there at the same time. I wasn't actually with him in his group. He was just there on a family holiday, and they wanted to visit the bribing stone. I think it was the only stone they actually did visit. I just happened to be there at the time, lifting it with someone else. And he lifted the stone up onto his lap, and then he put his hands down underneath like that, curl it up like that, and then I just kind of say to him, "Well, before you lift it any further, put your elbows up. You know, put them up here,
Mhm.
because lifting it down here, you might just cause yourself a bicep injury.
Yeah.
So keep the pressure off and lift it here." And then I got him to put his chest into it as well. He lifted it up once, and it was maybe just on his stomach here. And then he went to do it again, see if he could do it higher. So I says, well, so I gave him a few pointers, and I said, well, put your chest into it, and then as he was lifting, I was just telling him, like, reminding him what he can do. And then he put his chest in, and lifted it up, and it was really hard. It was a really good lift.
Yeah.
But all I ever do I never like to say someone's lifting a stone wrong. I just like to ever think they're going to injure themselves.
Yeah.
I'll encourage them to change the part of the technique they're
Sure.
doing, like, you know, moving the arm from here to here. Or I was kind of working with a client just now. She was working Atlas stones, and she was struggling a little bit with getting the stone to the platform. But when she put it over her knees, she wasn't pulling the stone into her
Yeah.
body. She put it over her knees and putting her body down into the stone. So she was making it a lot more difficult for herself. But I got her just to sit yourself when she pulls the stone over her knees, to sit yourself, like, pull in, just constantly, just say it to herself as she lifts it up over her knees, pull in. So she's pulling the stone in after that into her stomach, and then putting her chest in, and then lifting it up. And she actually got on really well and went higher, lifted heavier stone than which we usually would. Just
Awesome.
from that change in technique, there's a little bit of technique there.
Yeah. I mean, you've been lifting stones consistently for well over a decade, so you're clearly proof that you can have longevity in something that is so physically taxing and demanding. And I know anyone who is listening to this that is a stone lifter that posts online has probably gotten this a bit, and we've seen it ramp up quite recently, because David's stone lifts are getting quite a lot of attention because they're incredible feats of strength. But with the kudos that you get, probably a 10-to-1 ratio is people that are discrediting your achievement by saying, well, great for you, you put a 365-pound stone on your shoulder. Talk to me in a couple months when your back is destroyed. As someone who is proof of concept that you can have longevity in stone lifting, what do you say to those sort of naysayers that say, by doing this, you're really just you're taking a shortcut to crippling yourself in old age?
Well, I'm
Number one.
I'm going to be 45 in June,
Yeah.
and I don't think I've peaked yet. I'm still going to lift heavier over the next few years. I've got some goals, and I'm going to lift heavier than I've ever lifted before. So I feel stronger, I feel better. But what I would say is, I've had so many people say that to me over the years.
Yeah.
You're going to hit your back, you do this, do that. But I say, well, the thing is, if you learn technique, and you start at an average weight for yourself, which is another question I keep getting as well. What weight what stone should I lift if I'm lifting?
Right.
If I'm training with stone, how much weight should I lift if I'm lifting this in the gym? Well, I can't tell you. You need to go and lift the stone and see how you get on first. I can just show you, like, the technique and teach you how to do it properly with the most minimal effect of any kind of injury happening. But I just say to people, well, I think you can get injured doing anything. Look at all these people, and look at Christopher Reeves, which is he fell off a horse and broke his back.
Right.
Took him on, and that was him
Tonight horse.
for life,
Yeah.
So, I mean, as tragic as that was, it's a good example. I mean, that is not the kind of thing you think would happen from
For sure.
from playing polo on a horse, falling off the thing and breaking your back. Because the guy was an amazing actor, and it would have been great. I wish that never happened, because I would love to see the guy in more movies.
Yeah.
Sure.
But then, same with car racing, bike racing, anything, football. I mean, look at all the guys in American football. How many have had head injuries and are kind of mentally ill now as well because of that head injury? Any sport you can get hurt in, but then if you learn a technique and you start at a moderate weight for yourself, you build your muscle foundation up, you build the technique up, your body just builds over time. You learn to use your body mechanics properly, and then as long as you do everything right, then it's done correctly, and there's no chance of there's basically minimal chance of an injury happening, because you've built your body up to withstand the kind of weights you're lifting.
Yeah.
Through time. So I've heard a lot of folks saying about the back thing and saying, "Oh, you hurt your back," and I say, "Well, my back feels a lot stronger than it ever has because
Wow.
I've stone lifting. But I have learnt the technique. I've spent time learning the technique. I've spent time with my body mechanics to get them all right. I've spent time lifting repetition after repetition to build the muscles up, to build the tendons up, to build the body up, everything, which has now strengthened all the muscles, the bigger muscles around the smaller muscles, around the bones, everything else. So now, because I've spent time doing it over years, my body is built up to withstand big lifts and big achievements. So as long as things done right, then you can go on for forever. I mean, I'm writing a new book just now, and part of the book is in the Highland Games. But because I used to do tug of war for a number of years, and I know from experience it's a very hard sport, so I'm writing about tug of war in the book as well, and I'm using that tug of war aspect to write about grip and training grip and stuff. But in the tug of war aspect of the part of the book, I'm writing about two different teams, one from Scotland and one from England. And the team from England, there's a guy in there who's been pulling for years. He's now 73. He's 73-year-old.
73?
Yes, you'll soon be 74. And he is pulling on a rope like he was 40 years old.
Unbelievable.
Because I was watching their team at the Scottish and Irish tug of war championships, and they actually got gold medal, and they bet teams that were like half their age, and that's what attracted me to write about this team in the book, because they've been around the world multiple times, just as the Scottish Cornhill team have. Because the guy is 73 years old, he was very close to 74, I think. It was just phenomenal seeing him on the rope and pulling for 2 days straight, and so many different competitions over that 2 days, and just walking away like he hadn't even done anything. He seemed fitter and stronger than guys in their 30s and 40s were.
That's
and he's
true.
73. So age, truly, as long as you look after yourself and do things right, train your body properly, learn technique, you learn your body mechanics, look after yourself, then you can compete in sport, strength, lift stones for as long as you want.
Yeah, and I feel very similar about that, especially with respect to the stones. Like, there's guys that could walk up to a dumbbell, for instance, or a barbell, pardon me, for instance, and they could pull a deadlift that they could squeeze out a deadlift they have no business lifting, with their back arching, their form terrible. But stones keep you too honest. You can't. Like, if you don't have that experience, if you don't have the grip strength or anything, that your grip is going to give out before your back. And it's very difficult to lift a stone poorly, because it's such a challenging lift that one part of you is going to give out, and you're going to lose that stone long before you're going to get injured, especially for people that are beginning. And obviously technique is the most important to develop at the start, but also I think that's where the risk of injury is almost the lowest, because a 200-pound stone can be very difficult for even a strong guy without the experience. And it's very unlikely that a grown man is going to hurt himself attempting a 200-pound stone, right?
Yeah, well, look at the if you look at building sites, for example, all the injuries that people go through in building sites from their legs, their backs, their hamstrings, especially their lower back, it's because they're lifting. They're not actually even lifting heavy. They're just lifting in very bad form and technique. Whereas we've learnt the technique of lifting the stone properly. We're using my body mechanics efficiently, and there's no injury there. We're lifting like 10 times heavier than what guys might be lifting on a daily basis in a building site or a weekly basis in a building site. But they're the ones that are coming up with injuries because they haven't learnt any kind of lifting technique. They just grip it and rip it and get on with the job.
Yeah, I know the type.
So as long as you learn the technique and use your body to as proficient as it can be used, then you can stay away from injury and lift for decades, for years and years.
Switch gears here and talk about Stoneland, because anyone listening to this, as David said, if you hadn't seen Stoneland before, your homework was to stop listening, go watch Stoneland. So if you're still listening, that means you have watched Stoneland at some point or another. But I mean, when you talk about pieces of media that brought about like an incredible swell of pride, at least within myself, at my Scottish heritage, like you've got at the top shelf, you've got Braveheart and you've got Stoneland. That documentary was so beautifully done. It was so respectful. Yeah, it was so beautifully done. But it was badass. Like the way that they presented Scottish culture and Scottish heritage and stone lifting in particular. It was a beautiful thing to watch, but it also, like David said, it gets you pumped up. You just want to go out there and stone lift, and you use it as encouragement, like when he wants to go and lift. How did that whole involvement in Stoneland come about for you?
Well, first of all, you've got to give all the credit really to the film crew, the film crew that worked for Rogue Fitness, because they filmed it and put it together really, really well. I mean, you can film the greatest people in the world, and if it's not done right, it could be a really crap documentary. But you've got to have trust in the people who are putting it together, and the film crew and the editing did an amazing job putting it all together. But the way it got started was through David Webster and Peter Martin, because John and Terry Todd have been friends with David for so many years. Going back to early years of World's Strongest Man, where they were all hosting it and organising it and things. And then David would go and spend time with them in America at their home for a few months in the summer. And then on occasions they would Terry and John would come over here to Scotland and spend time with David. But then one time when it came over, I think it was actually I don't think it was 79. I think it was that would have been a different time than 79 when they came over and John lifted the Dinny Stones. A few years after, they came over again to spend time with David Webster, and David introduced them to Peter Martin. And Peter regaled Terry and John with so many great stories about stone lifting and the culture and the history and what it means to people. That they were so taken with that for years they were working on the aspect of putting everything in a documentary. And then in 2016, that was what happened. They got it was Bill Crawford that got in touch with me, asked if I'd be willing to be a part of it. So of course I jumped at the chance because I thought it was great. And I was going to I met Bill in 2014, but I hadn't seen him since. So it would have been. I was looking forward to seeing him again. And then I knew David, but not very well. So it was a really good chance to spend time with him. And I'd never met John and Terry before, but I knew who they were through watching Strongman. So it was really great to know I was going to get to work with them as well. And then they asked. Then before we started, asked me to help put together a kind of structure of the whole tour. So we know which stones we're going to go and lift on each day, things like that. And then I went and got permission in case we had to get permission from people to lift certain stones to film them for the documentary. So I spent a while getting in touch with local councils and stuff for some of the stones that were used, like the Braving Stone, just to make sure we had the permission to film there. And then the woman who owned the field where the Fianna stone sits, the testing stone of the Fianna, she was a French woman. She was actually in France at the time, but the person who was looking after her estate, I spoke to him and he got in touch with her and asked if it was okay for us to film there, stuff like that. And then after a while, after we got everything together, we spoke on the phone a few times, just for logistics and just to make sure that everything was going to work out okay, where to meet and what was going to do in each day. And then we came over here and we just went for it. Had an amazing time. And every night we would sit down, have a meal, have a pint, and Terry and John would just tell us stories about their life and what they've done through the strength world and stuff. And it was just amazing hearing some of the stories, the people they knew, and everything, things they've done, the travelling they've done, and everything they've kind of been involved in within the world of strength. So I mean, without people like John and Terry and David and Peter, none of us would really be here just now speaking about this. This would be stonelifting would be like a lost culture. Strength in the whole, and if it was really for John and Terry especially, strength, then David come along and helping them out. Strength would be wouldn't be what it is today. Maybe no Stoneman, things like that,
It's a very, very good documentary, and it's, like I said, pumps me up every time.
Did you have any idea when you were contacted to be a part of it that it would turn into such an incredible and major production? And really, I mean, like we said, like we're here in many ways because of that documentary. It has opened the door to stone lifting for thousands of people, and it just, anyone who watches it just is completely enthralled by not only the activity and the tradition of stone lifting, but the characters that it does such an incredible job of highlighting. Did you have any idea that that it would turn into a phenomenal?
Well, I was, to be honest, I mean, Peter Martin had passed away the year before, and I think it was October 2015. And then I went to his funeral. That's where I met David Webster, Peter's funeral. And then after I went home, the next day, I started working on the Historic Stonelifting Facebook page. In fact, that's where the name Historic Stones come from, because I was thinking of a name for a while to what I was going to name it, and I thought, well, I wrote a lot of stuff down. Then I come up with Historic Stones, and then Historic Stonelifting. But I think it's from that, because that was dedicated really to Peter's memory, and Peter was really the foundation of bringing everyone together in a sense. And then after his father seen like the Everstone, after David Webster took it to Glasgow, that kindled his fire. But I think what really kindles for everyone else is the fact that Peter kind of continued all the history and put us all together. And then the fact that people are using now calling Manu stones Clark Nerts, as they're called in Scottish Gaelic. Everyone calls them now historic stones, which is a name I came up with for the website, for the Facebook page, which is dedicated to Peter. So in a way, everyone's kind of honouring Peter Martin through calling the stones historic stones, because that name came about from him. I think I've kind of went off with the question here.
No, it's very good. I mean, it is a beautiful segue into sort of the very honest grassroots effort of Peter Martin and David Webster and others to find historical stones. What do you think Peter Martin would think or feel seeing what sort of this emerging phenomenon stone lifting has become now in 2024 that was precipitated by a lot of his work?
I think he would have loved it, because he was always saying to me, because I spent a lot of time with Peter, we emailed almost every week, and then I spent face to face, we spent time together quite often. But he was, every time we was together, he would always say that he would like to get more people involved in stone lifting. In his book, he was writing his book to get the history out there and get more people involved. So I think he would love the fact that there's so many people actually getting involved in this tradition.
Yeah, it's
I
become
think he would love it. But like I say, I'm just, I think it's kind of, in a way, it kind of honours him that everyone is, like I say, calling Stone, Man Who Stones, or Clark in the Arts. I've had a few names: Clark in the Arts, Man Who Stones, Stones of Strength. Everyone is just, like I say, everyone calls them now Historic Stones,
Mhm.
which is a name that came about through creating the Facebook page, which was in turn I only made it in honour of what Peter had done, just to keep his work kind of going. So I think he would actually love the fact that there's so many people involved in stonelifting now, because I think his hope was to get more people involved, especially from all over the world.
Well, that's certainly happened, and it's happening more and more each month, each year now, as we've been seeing. It's really growing.
Yeah. Do you still find that people are connecting with you by way of having watched Stoneland? Like, has that momentum
Yeah,
flowed at all, or is
only 2 weeks ago, I had someone get in touch and saying they just watched Stoneman for the first time, and they said they loved it and they're wanting to now get involved in stonelifting, and they watched it with their family, and he said even his granny, she's wanting to travel with him to watch see him lift some of the stones, but more just to see Scotland
yeah,
after watching Stoneland.
yeah,
Awesome.
But even now, I'm getting people just still getting in touch and saying they've watched it and they've liked it. And same with the book, they've liked the book. Um, but then I've got 2 books coming out this year, and the second book is called Stone Lifting Blueprint,
Oh,
or
okay.
name,
Right on.
which is it'll be maybe like 100 pages maybe or so, and it's just really getting more in depth with if you go and try and pick and source a stone, what kind of stone would be good for lifting, for like if you want to press overhead or just get used to lifting stones, or what kind of maybe stone would be good to take home with you, and just more delve into the technical aspects of how the body mechanics work and how the muscles react and how gravity, the center of gravity plays a big part in like lifting a stone from a barbell. Because the further the further like maybe the weights are away from you, away from your body at the size, the less kind of gravity again is pulling against it within your like triangular gravity from your own body. So it's easier to lift the barbell than it is to lift the stone. I'm just going to delve into the really in-depth kind of aspects of the whole thing and breaking
manual.
breaking the technique down a little bit more,
Yeah.
And if you've not got a stone, you start with a sandbag, which is a very good translation of what the stone of them.
Yeah,
It certainly is.
yeah.
Oh, that's very exciting. You also do coaching as well, is that right? If anyone out there is looking.
Yes, I've got on here. Look, that's Stoneman Fitness.
There we go.
Yeah.
So, I coach online. Well, I do one-to-one sessions, which I've got a client just now, and I've coaching people online, so I can reach people wherever they are in the world.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, you have a ton of knowledge to share. We did have a couple. Was there a couple questions?
Yeah, let's hit up the old Instagram, because we did put out a poll for people to ask questions that they wanted to hear answers from the Stoneman. So
one of them was, what is the most difficult stone you've ever lifted? Whether it's historical or one of yours, or just what's the stone that you, with all your experience, found the most difficult for that time?
It would have been the Dinny Stones.
Okay.
Not so much because really the weight per se. It was more because I was just all I had really done before then is like trying to lift stones to my chest and my shoulder and overhead. So I just kind of learnt kind of like a different technique. So I kind of found the transition to going to getting the right technique for the Dinny Stones awkward for me.
For sure.
But it wasn't. It was when I went over to America and stayed with Paul Crawford for a week in February and March 2017. he showed me the kind of a good technique to lift the Denny stones. And the cool thing was, David Webster was there at the time as well.
Right, cool.
We did like a special screening in America at a cinema over there for Stoneman. We had about 500-600 people come and watch the screening of the Stoneman, and then after that we went on stage and answered questions. And then we did a little demonstration backstage for people after that.
That's really cool.
So David was there as well. Was in Bill's garage, and he showed me a good like a technique he uses, which worked really well for me as well. How to lift the Denny stones, and then I lifted. He put I think it was maybe a few a few kilos over the Denny stone weight, and I managed to lift them. That was the first time I lifted that weight, and it was in front of Bill and David, so it was pretty cool at the time.
That is cool. Right on. Okay, the Denny. That's
the Denny. So that would be the Denny stones was the hardest one I did, just because the transition over to finding that technique from what I'm used to.
Got two questions here from Darth Cannoli. So the first one is, what is your most memorable lift?
That would have to be the Inverstone, because the Inverstone is my favourite stone, which you know. It was the first one I did, but apart from being the first one I did, it's the Inverstone and the Bravenstone, which was the second one I did. They are the two stones that I've got the biggest recollection for when I parked the car and I walked over to them. But my favourite stone is like the most memorable stone is the Inverstone, because it's also the day I met Peter Martin for the first time, and we spent a couple of maybe 2 hours speaking about strength and stone lifting and stuff. So that would be the best time, the most memorable thing, and probably the best time ever. Well, the most important stone lift for me was that day.
That's a pretty amazing experience, both the lifting of the stone and then meeting Mr. Peter Martin. The second question you had is there a stone you've always wanted to lift but haven't? And do you have a plan to go and lift it?
Yes, that would be the Husfell stone in Iceland.
Nice. Yeah, you and me both.
I was planning going over a couple of years ago, but with life getting away and money and stuff, it just wasn't possible then. But we're actually I'm actually one of four producers of a new documentary we're doing next year, and we're filming in Scotland, Ireland, and Iceland. So when we're over in Iceland next year, I'm gonna have a crack at the walking with Husfell stone.
Beautiful.
See if I can get all the way around. So
awesome.
Next year, hopefully.
All right, we got one here from Gio Bressler, and he had asked, what is the best basic training for stone lifting?
Well, if you can't get a stone itself, which a lot of people can maybe locate stones in, say, quarries or fields or rivers, but they might have a hard time getting a stone home if they've not got a truck or know anyone that has a truck to help them get it home. Then you can get a sandbag, fill the sandbag to a certain weight, because like I say, the sandbag is it crosses over to stone lifting a lot, especially for strengthening your grip and your forearm strength with a squeeze when it's done. I would say if you want to lift stones, you need to train with stones, or a sandbag at least, and then you need to learn the basics of the technique. Getting your feet in position first, grabbing a stone, put your hands in place, and then getting your legs. You can bending your knees so your backside comes down, your glutes come down, and then keep your back straight, and just learning that technique before you go and lift. And then if you're new to stone lifting, even if you're a seasoned stone lifter, my best advice is to start off with the row. Train the row, and then before you go and lift any stone, especially a new stone to you, row the stone first once you get your hand position to make sure that the stone feels right in your hands, the balance feels right, the grip feels right, because it might be textured on one side, different, so it could be smooth at one side and not so smooth on the other side, so one hand might slip out. So rowing the stone for a few inches off the ground first is very important before you try and lift it over the knees, just to make sure you've got everything feels right, the balance is right, the grip's right.
Awesome.
But yeah, if you can't get a stone to your home, then get a sandbag, just buy one online and then go and buy bags of sand from a building supplier, and then just fill it up.
Is there any other ones, or that's?
Yeah, I got a question. I got one. So, as we've said, a lot of people have become aware of stone lifting or been encouraged to try stone lifting by way of the Stoneman documentary and the way that that documentary has made them feel. How would you describe, considering stone lifting is it's a part of who you are. How would you describe how stone lifting, I was going to say makes you feel to a person, but let's get a little weird for a second. How would you describe how stone lifting, 1,000 years from now, some AI automaton is pouring back through the archives and finds this humble little podcast called Stone Strength Podcast, and the Stoneman is on it. How would you explain how stone lifting makes you feel to something that doesn't know what feeling means? No, I'm saying, how would you explain? What does stone lifting make you feel? Why is it such a big part of who you are?
Well, the first part of it would be since I've been doing stone lifting for so long, and kind of got my technique down, and especially if you go into the row in the stone and to start with to pick it up to see I've got the right hand position, kind of in accordance to what that stone, the stone structure is, the characteristics of it. I look at a stone. The first part I'll say is I look at a stone like a problem in life, like a stone, like a misshapen stone. Because if I've got a problem in my life and then I'm maybe stressed out and find it hard to deal with, or I've maybe got too much going on at a time, then I'll think about the problem. If I can't solve it, I'll take a step back, readjust my thought process, my thinking, and then I'll attack the problem again, and then hopefully solve it. So it's like lifting a stone. If you go and say get the Newton Moore stone, for example, the Newton Moore stone is it's only 101 kilograms, but it's very misshapen, so it's an awkward lift. So there's so many different ways you can turn that stone to lift it. So if you lift it off the ground, but it doesn't, you're looking at it, you assess it, you put it in a position, you grab it, you try and lift it off the ground a few inches, but it's maybe rolls forward or doesn't feel right. You put it down. You stand up, you take a few steps back, you look at the stone again, reassess it, turn it another way, go and grab it and succeed. So I think for me, stone lifting has changed my life in so many ways. It's almost indescribable. Because of stone lifting, I've met so many great people. Just like I've met yourselves, and I've met people from around the world. I've travelled to America 6 times and gone back again in June. I would never have left Scotland otherwise. And it's given me something stone lifting has given me something to really focus on in life. So all the problems that life have, which we all go through them, everything I have kind of found to deal with easier because I've felt better through lifting stones. Maybe you've had a bad day. You go outside, and I go out in the back garden, I lift a few stones, or even roll the stone a few times. You get that sudden urge, that adrenaline comes out, the endorphins release from your brain. Your heart starts pumping, you get all the oxygen starts flowing through your body. You're releasing toxins and stuff. Carbon dioxide comes out your body, so everything feels better through this exercise, through this fetal strength. And I come back and I sit down and I feel like I'm ready to tackle the world, take on anything.
Right.
I can deal with any problem in my life. So it's like stone lifting just changed my life in so many ways. I think without it, I would be a bum. I would probably be. I don't know who I'd be. I wouldn't be. I definitely would not be the man I am today.
The Stoneman.
That's very well said. Well,
I think I would probably be a former shadow of who I am without it. It changed my life in so many ways. Like I say before, that's why I've got so much respect for what I've had out with stone lifting, and which I'm continuing getting. I always write it as one word and with a capital S, just to give stone lifting respect I think it deserves from myself, because it's given me so much back. That's why I enjoy teaching as well, because it's like I'm like giving back as well.
Whatever.
But it's like
Let's say whatever.
it's given me so much.
So go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, so hi. It's like you've got the Arnold Classic next month over here in UK, so I've been invited to go down and help out with that as well. So I'll be helping run the Stoneman competition for the 2 days on Saturday and Sunday. Backstage, setting everything up, taking everything down, just make sure everything's prepared. And only because I've met so many good people. And then I got an email from John asking me to go down and help out. If it wasn't for Stonelifting, I wouldn't know yourselves, who I respect as well. I wouldn't know Bill. I wouldn't know any of the probably around the world that I do know. I wouldn't know John, David. I wouldn't have probably been friends with. I might not have known David or Peter or Andy. So Stonelifting has given me so much.
I would say whatever Stonelifting's given you, you have paid forward to the rest of us who are now a part of this incredible tradition because of some of your efforts. So
thank you very much for your time today and for everything that you've done for Stonelifting and helped influence so many. And I know you'll continue doing that.
Well, if I can help anyone in any kind of way, then I'm happy to do that. Because like I say, next year I've been planning. Even I've got like a charity I was hoping to kind of get off the ground as well, called Double Strength. Strengthening the mind through strengthening the body. It's just for people who have PhD. Is it? I'm forgetting the word.
Yeah.
Aye. Yeah. Or like depression.
Yeah.
So teach them, get them strong, strengthen their body to strengthen their mind, because that's what it's done for me. I've strengthened my body, and it's given me a stronger mind to deal with the world as a general. Introducing them to stone lifting, to strength, to the history behind the stones, getting them involved, and hope that it can help change other people's lives just as much as it's changed myself.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. Well, Martin, the Stoneman Jansix, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I'm honoured and appreciate the chance to speak with you both. Let's say I've got respect for both you as people and stone lifters, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Well, it's been a pleasure, and we'll talk soon, man. Thank you for your time.